Sarah Chen Okafor stood on the observation deck of the main colony tower, watching the twin suns of Kepler 442b, set behind the mountain range her great-grandmother had named the Iron Teeth. The mountains earned that name because they were hard, as steel and just as sharp. Everything on this world was hard. The ground fought back when they tried to farm it. The air burned their lungs until they built the processors. Even the water had to be wrestled from deep underground, but they had won. After 150 years, the colony of New Haven was home to 3 million people who had never seen Earth. Sarah was one of them. Her great-grandmother Maya Chen had been part of the original colony ship that landed here in 2387. Maya used to tell stories about Earth, about blue skies and oceans and rain that didn't try to kill you. Sarah had heard those stories as a child, but they felt like fairy tales now. The colony had changed since Maya's time. The first generation spent all their energy just staying alive. The second generation learned to fight back against the planet. The third generation, Sarah's parents, had started to win. Now the fourth generation was strong. They were born here. Their bones were dense from the heavy gravity. Their lungs could process the thin air better than any Earth human ever could. Their minds were sharp from solving problems that would have killed their ancestors. Sarah touched the window and felt the vibration from the atmospheric processors. The machines hummed day and night, turning poison air into something humans could breathe. Her people had built them from scratch using parts salvaged from the colony ship and materials mined from the Iron Teeth. Earth's engineers said it was impossible to build atmospheric processors without rare elements that didn't exist on Kepler 442b. Earth's engineers had been wrong. Director Chen Okafor, we have a situation. Sarah turned to see Marcus Webb, her head of communications, walking toward her, with a worried look. Marcus was third generation like Sarah, but his family specialized in maintaining contact with the other human colonies. Or they used to, back when there was contact to maintain. What kind of situation? Sarah asked. Long-range sensors are picking up something big heading our way. Really big. Multiple ships moving in formation. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. It had been 23 years since they received the last message from Earth. Before that, communications had been regular. Supply ship schedules, news updates, technical specifications for new equipment. Then suddenly, nothing. The last message had been strange, talking about galactic integration and new opportunities for humanity among the stars. Sarah had read it dozens of times over the years, trying to understand what it meant. They had sent messages back to Earth but never received replies. The other human colonies went silent too, one by one. New Singapore stopped responding first, then Aurora Prime, then the mining stations around Wolf 359. Sarah's people had assumed Earth had moved on to bigger things. Maybe they had joined some kind of galactic community and forgotten about the small frontier colonies. How big are we talking about? Sarah asked as they walked toward the communication center. 12 ships, maybe more. They're still too far out to get clear readings, but they're massive. Bigger than anything in our records, including the old Earth fleet specifications. The communication center was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Technicians sat at control panels covered with screens and blinking lights. The room smelled like hot electronics and recycled air. Sarah had spent countless hours here as a child, learning about radio waves and quantum communications from her father. Show me, Sarah said. The main screen lit up with a display of local space. 12 red dots were moving toward Kepler 442b in perfect formation. The computer displayed their estimated size and speed in numbers that made Sarah's breath catch.
Those are warships, said Dr. Elizabeth Nakamura, the colony's chief scientist. Elizabeth was second generation, born to parents who remembered Earth directly. She had been studying the approaching fleet for the past hour. The energy signatures
are unlike anything in our database. The propulsion system alone should be impossible based on everything we know about physics. Could they be from Earth? Marcus asked. No, Elizabeth said firmly. Earth ships use fusion drives. These things are using something else entirely. Something that bends space around them. Sarah stared at the screen. The ships would reach Kepler 442b in less than 6 hours. She had to make decisions. But she needed more information first. Can we communicate with them? We've been trying standard hailing frequencies, no response so far. Keep trying, use every language in our database. If they don't respond to English, try Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, everything. Sarah paused, thinking. Also, try mathematical sequences. Prime numbers, the Fibonacci sequence, anything that shows intelligence. She turned to address the whole room. I want all department heads in the council chamber in 20 minutes, and someone wake up Captain Torres. Captain Elena Torres was the colony's military commander, though her military consisted mostly of mining equipment that could be converted into weapons and a few dozen security officers who handled disputes between colonists. New Haven had never faced a real military threat. There had never been a need. 20 minutes later, Sarah sat at the head of a long table surrounded by the colony's leadership. Captain Torres looked alert despite being woken from sleep. She was first generation, one of the few original colonists still alive. She remembered Earth not as stories but as home. What do we know about their intentions? Torres asked. Nothing yet, Sarah replied. They're not responding to communications, but they're also not showing any obvious hostile behavior. They're approaching at a steady speed, maintaining formation. If they wanted to attack by surprise, they could have approached faster or tried to hide. Maybe they're explorers, suggested Dr. Patel, head of the medical department. First contact with an alien species. This could be historic. Or they could be conquerors, Torres said grimly. In my experience, when unknown ships approach your world in military formation, you should prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Sarah nodded. What are our defensive capabilities? Torres looked uncomfortable. Limited. We have the mining. Lasers. They could be rigged as weapons, but they're not designed for space combat. Our security force is trained for crowd control and emergency response, not warfare. The atmospheric processors have some defensive features, but only against environmental threats. What about evacuation? We have transport ships that could move people to the outer colonies on the moons, but it would take days to evacuate everyone, and if these visitors have the kind of technology we're seeing, there's nowhere in the system we could hide. Sarah leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of 3 million lives on her shoulders. Her great-grandmother Maya had made similar decisions during the early days of the colony, when crop failures or equipment breakdowns could kill thousands, but Maya had never faced visitors from the stars. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. I've been monitoring communications from the other human colonies, the few that are still transmitting anyway. 3 weeks ago, New Singapore sent out a distress signal, something about integration and compliance. Then they went silent. The room fell quiet. Sarah felt cold despite the warm air from the heating system. Integration, she repeated. That word was in Earth's last message too. It could be a coincidence, Dr. Patel suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. Captain Torres stood up. Director, I recommend we go to alert status. Prepare our... Sarah was about to respond when an alarm started blaring throughout the building. Marcus's communication device buzzed, and he answered it quickly. They're broadcasting, he said. The alien ships, they're sending a message to the entire planet. They rushed back to the communication center. The main screen now showed a clear image of the approaching fleet. The ships were elegant and deadly, like giant crystal formations that had been carved into weapons. They moved through space with impossible grace, reality seeming to bend around them. Put the message through, Sarah ordered. The screen changed to show an alien face. The creature was beautiful in a strange way, with crystalline features that caught and reflected light like a prism. When it spoke, its voice was calm and musical, but the words it used made Sarah's blood turn to ice. Greetings, inhabitants of the world you call Kepler 442b. I am Admiral Kethvar of the Vorthak hegemony. Your world has been selected for integration into our civilization. You will be classified as a Class 7 species and relocated to appropriate industrial facilities where your natural abilities can be properly utilized. The alien paused as if giving them time to absorb this information. Resistance is not recommended. Your technology is primitive and your numbers are small. Compliance will ensure your survival, and a useful place in our society. You have 6 standard time units to prepare for transport. Any attempt at aggression will result in corrective measures. The transmission ended, leaving the communication center in stunned silence. Sarah stared at the screen, her mind racing. Class 7 species, industrial facilities. The words were polite, but their meaning was clear. These aliens of the hegemony saw humans as nothing more than useful animals to be moved around as needed. 6 hours, Captain Torres said quietly. They're giving us 6 hours to surrender. We need to send a message to Earth, Sarah said, suddenly. Now. Director, Earth hasn't responded to our communications in over 20 years, Marcus pointed out. I don't care. This changes everything. If the hegemony is doing this to us, they might be doing it to other human colonies too. Earth needs to know. She turned to Dr. Nakamura. Elizabeth, what's the status on the quantum entanglement communicator? Elizabeth looked surprised. The experimental unit? It's still in testing phase. We've never tried to send a signal all the way to Earth. The power requirements alone would drain half the colony's energy reserves. Do it anyway. Sarah, even if it works, even if Earth receives the message, they're 50 light-years away. Even if they sent help immediately, it would take decades to reach us. Sarah walked to the window and looked out at her world. New Haven stretched below her, a city built from determination and stubbornness. Gardens grew in soil that had once been poison. Children played in air that had once burned human lungs. Every building, every road, every life represented a victory against impossible odds. Her great-grandmother Maya had faced impossible odds too. When the crop failures came in year 7, when the atmospheric processors broke down in year 12, when the mining accident in year 18 trapped 200 people underground, Maya had never given up. She had never accepted that her people were helpless. Prepare the message, Sarah said. Tell Earth exactly what's happening here. Tell them the hegemony thinks we're alone. Tell them we need them. She paused, looking at the alien ships growing larger on the screen. And tell them that New Haven remembers what it means to be human. We won't go quietly. As her staff rushed to prepare the quantum communicator, Sarah allowed herself one moment of doubt. 23 years of silence from Earth. Maybe humanity really had moved on. Maybe Earth had joined the hegemony willingly. Maybe her message would disappear into empty space with no one listening. But she had to try. Because Maya Chen Okafor hadn't raised her family to surrender. Because 3 million people on Kepler 442b deserved better than slavery. Because somewhere in the galaxy, Earth was still home. The quantum communicator powered up with a sound like thunder. Sarah spoke her message into the transmitter, knowing it might be the last free words any human would speak in this system. Earth. This is Director Sarah Chen Okafor of the New Haven colony on Kepler 442b. We are under attack by an alien force calling itself the Vorthak hegemony. They intend to enslave our population. We are outnumbered and outgunned. We don't know if you can hear this message or if you still care about the colonies you planted among the stars. But if you do, if you remember us, we need you now. This is our final free transmission. New Haven out. The message shot across space faster than light, carried by quantum entanglement to receivers that might or might not still exist on Earth. Sarah didn't know if anyone would hear it. She didn't know if anyone would care. But she had done what Maya would have done. She had refused to give up without a fight. Above Kepler 442b, the hegemony fleet moved into attack position, confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had done this hundreds of times before. It always ended the same way. But Admiral Kethvar had never encountered humans before. He had never learned the most important lesson about humanity. They were at their most dangerous when they appeared, to be helpless. And somewhere in the quantum foam between dimensions, Sarah's message raced toward Earth, carrying with it a simple truth that would change everything. Earth had not forgotten its children. Earth had been waiting. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of the hegemony flagship Eternal Harmony, watching the primitive world grow larger on the viewing screen. His crystalline body caught the light from the ship's systems, creating small rainbows that danced across his translucent skin. The bridge around him was a work of art, all flowing curves and gentle lights that promoted calm and efficiency. The hegemony believed that beautiful surroundings created beautiful thoughts. Status report, he said, his musical voice carrying easily through the bridge. All ships in position, Admiral, replied his tactical officer, a six-armed creature called a hexarch. The planet shows no signs of military preparation. Their technology appears to be exactly what our surveys predicted. Early industrial, barely capable of atmospheric flight. No weapon systems worth mentioning. Kethvar nodded, satisfied. This would be another routine integration. The species called themselves humans, and they showed promise as a labor class. Their psychological profiles indicated they were emotional and adaptable, which made them easy to control through proper incentives. They also seemed to form strong social bonds, which meant threatening one could be used to control many others. Any response to our ultimatum? None yet, Admiral. We're monitoring their communication channels. They appear to be discussing their options. Kethvar allowed himself a small smile. There were no options, of course. The humans would realize this soon enough. They always did. The Vorthak hegemony had perfected the art of integration over the past 2,000 years. It was a beautiful system, really. Instead of the crude conquests practiced by lesser civilizations, the hegemony offered something better: purpose. Every species had its place in the grand design. The Vorthak provided leadership and vision. The crystalline monks like himself offered wisdom and strategy. The hexarchs handled tactics and engineering. The floating minds processed information and calculations, and at the bottom of the pyramid, the worker species performed the physical labor that kept civilization running. It was honest work, and the hegemony treated its workers well. They were fed, housed, given medical care, and even allowed limited reproduction rights. What more could a primitive species ask for? Admiral, we're detecting some unusual energy signatures from the planet, the sensor operator reported. High-energy transmissions, but not directed at us. Probably communications with their other settlements, Kethvar said dismissively. Standard panic responses. Are you detecting any weapon systems? No, sir, nothing that could threaten our fleet. The strongest energy sources appear to be industrial equipment, mining lasers, atmospheric processors, basic fusion reactors. Their space-based infrastructure is minimal. Kethvar walked to the large window that dominated one side of the bridge. The planet below was actually quite beautiful, with its twin suns casting interesting shadows across the mountain ranges. The humans had built their main settlement in a valley between several peaks, which showed some intelligence. The location provided natural protection against the harsh weather patterns his sensors had detected. Tell me about the species again, he said to his intelligence officer, a floating mind whose consciousness existed as patterns of light in a crystal matrix. Designation: human. Average lifespan: 80 to 100 standard years. Reproduction rate: moderate. Physical characteristics: bipedal, carbon-based, moderate strength and intelligence. Social structure: tribal with democratic tendencies. Psychological profile: highly emotional, strong family bonds, tendency toward irrational decision-making. Under stress: irrational decision-making, Kethvar repeated. That could be useful. Emotional species are often easier to control than logical ones. Yes, Admiral. However, there is one item of note in their profile. This particular colony has been isolated from their homeworld for several decades. Isolation sometimes produces unexpected adaptations. Kethvar considered this. Isolated populations could indeed develop surprising characteristics. But they were still primitive, still limited by their basic technology and small numbers. Any adaptations they had developed would be irrelevant against the hegemony's overwhelming superiority. Time until integration begins? 4 standard time units remaining, Admiral. Excellent. Begin deploying the transport pods. I want the first wave of workers moved to the processing centers within 12 hours of surrender. The hegemony's integration process was refined through centuries of practice. First, the local leadership would be identified and isolated. They would be given comfortable captivity and used to help manage the transition. The general population would be sorted by capability, the strongest for heavy labor, the most intelligent for technical work, the most compliant for administrative roles. Children would be separated from their parents and given proper hegemony education. Within a generation, they would think of themselves as citizens of the great civilization rather than members of their primitive birth culture. It was really quite humane when you thought about it properly. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the planet. Put it through. The main screen shifted to show a human female. She appeared to be middle-aged by her species standards, with dark skin and graying hair. Her clothing was practical rather than decorative, and her eyes held an intelligence that Kethvar found mildly interesting. "I am Director Sarah Chen Okafor of the New Haven colony," she said. "I speak for 3 million human beings who call this world home." 3 million. That was a good number, large enough to provide useful labor, small enough to transport efficiently. "We, Q, have received your ultimatum," the human continued. "Before we respond, we request clarification on several points." Kethvar gestured for the communication officer to open a channel. "I am Admiral Kethvar. You may ask your questions, but understand that the fundamental situation has not changed. Your world will be integrated." "What does integration mean? Exactly? What happens to our people?" "Your people will be relocated to facilities where they can contribute productively to hegemony society. You will be classified as a Class 7 species, which entitles you to basic housing, nutrition, medical care, and supervised reproduction rights. Your children will receive education appropriate to their capabilities." The human was quiet for a moment, and Kethvar could see her processing the information. Most species went through the same stages: denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance. This one appeared to be somewhere between denial and anger. "Supervised reproduction rights," she repeated. "You mean you decide who can have children and when?" "Correct. Uncontrolled population growth leads to inefficiency and suffering. The hegemony prevents such problems through careful resource management. And if we refuse integration? That would be unfortunate. Corrective measures would be necessary to ensure the safety of my fleet and the eventual success of the integration process. Such measures typically result in significant population reduction." Again, the human was quiet. Kethvar had learned to read the facial expressions of various species, and this one showed what humans called anger. That was expected. Most intelligent species experienced some form of rage when confronted with their own helplessness. "How many other worlds have you integrated?" she asked. "The hegemony spans 14,000 star systems and encompasses over 800 distinct species. Each has found their proper place in our civilization. And if a species is particularly resistant?" Kethvar allowed a hint of coldness to enter his voice. "The hegemony has existed for 2 millennia. We are still here. Resistant species are not." The human stared at him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Admiral Kethvar, I have one more question for you. In all your 14,000 star systems and 800 species, have you ever encountered humans before?" "No. Your species appears to be limited to a small number of worlds in this sector. Our surveys indicate your homeworld went silent several decades ago, likely due to internal conflicts or resource depletion." The smile on the human's face grew wider. "I see. Thank you for your honesty, Admiral. I need some time to discuss this with my people. Will you grant us the remaining time in your ultimatum?" "Of course. The hegemony is not unreasonable. You have 3 standard time units remaining." The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar mildly puzzled. The human's reaction had been unusual. Most species either collapsed into despair or made desperate threats at this point in the conversation. This Director Chen Okafor had seemed almost pleased by some of his answers. "Analysis of the human leader's behavior?" he asked the floating mind. "Inconclusive, Admiral. Her emotional patterns did not match standard responses to integration ultimatums. However, this may simply reflect individual variation within the species. Maintain monitoring of their communications. If they attempt to organize military resistance, I want to know immediately. Yes, Admiral. Kethvar returned to watching the planet. 3 hours remained until integration began. The humans would surrender, they always did, once they understood the reality of their situation. The hegemony had done this too many times, for any other outcome to be possible. But something about Director Chen Okafor's smile nagged at him. He had seen that expression before, on the faces of predators who had spotted prey. But that made no sense. The humans were the prey in this situation. They had to know that, didn't they? On the bridge of the flagship, sensors continued their passive scans of the human world. They detected industrial activity, communication traffic, and population movements that appeared to be evacuation procedures. All normal responses to an integration scenario. The sensors did not detect the quantum entanglement communicator buried deep in the mountains behind New Haven. They could not see the exotic particles that carried messages across impossible distances, faster than light itself. They had no way of knowing that 50 light-years away, ancient receivers were picking up signals from a world the galaxy had forgotten. The sensors also failed to detect the changes occurring in distant space, where reality itself was beginning to bend in ways that should have been impossible. The hegemony's technology was advanced by the standards of most species. But it was based on conventional physics, conventional understanding of how the universe worked. Humanity had learned to think differently. In 3 hours, Admiral Kethvar expected the humans to surrender. He expected them to accept their place as the newest members of the hegemony's vast labor force. He expected another routine integration, followed by another routine victory celebration. Admiral Kethvar had never been more wrong about anything in his long life, but he would not have to wait long to learn the truth. Because Director Chen Okafor's smile had not been the expression of a predator who had spotted prey. It had been the smile of someone who had just realized that the predator was about to discover it was actually the prey. And somewhere in the space between dimensions, Sarah, Chen Okafor's message continued racing toward Earth, carrying with it the coordinates of a world that was about to become the first site of humanity's return to galactic prominence. The hegemony had integrated 800 species across 14,000 worlds. They had never failed. They had never even been seriously challenged. They were about to learn why Earth had gone silent, and why that silence had not been surrender, but preparation. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of the Earth Defense Force flagship Prometheus Rising, staring at a holographic display that showed the Milky Way galaxy in perfect detail. Red dots marked the locations of human colonies, or where human colonies used to be. One by one, over the past 25 years, those dots had gone dark as communications ceased. Earth had not been idle during those years of silence. Admiral, we're receiving a priority alpha transmission on the Quantum Entanglement Network, reported Commander James Park, her communications officer. It's coming from Kepler 442b. Elena felt her pulse quicken. Kepler 442b, the New Haven colony. Sarah Chen Okafor's people. They had been silent for weeks, and Elena had feared the worst. Put it through immediately. The holographic display changed, to show Sarah's face. Even across 50 light-years of space, Elena could see the strain and determination in the other woman's eyes. They had never met in person, but Elena knew Sarah's file by heart. Fourth-generation colonist, brilliant engineer, natural leader, the kind of person who built civilizations in impossible places. Earth, this is Director Sarah Chen Okafor of the New Haven colony on Kepler 442b. We are under attack by an alien force calling itself the Vorthak hegemony. They intend to enslave our population. We are outnumbered and outgunned. We don't know if you can hear this message or if you still care about the colonies you planted among the stars. But if you do, if you remember us, we need you now. This is our final free transmission. New Haven out. The message ended, leaving the command center in grim silence. Elena stared at the display for a moment, then turned to address her senior staff. How long ago was that message sent? Based on quantum signature analysis, approximately 47 minutes ago, Park replied. Current status of the First Strike Division. All ships ready for immediate deployment, Admiral, reported her tactical officer, Commander Lisa Rodriguez. We can be underway in 15 minutes. Elena nodded, then activated her command console. The holographic display shifted to show Earth's solar system, with dozens of ships positioned around the outer planets. They were not the exploration vessels that had carried humanity to the stars decades ago. These ships had been built for one purpose: war. Open a channel to Terra Command, Elena ordered. The display showed the face of General Marcus Thompson, Elena's old friend and the current head of Earth's military forces. His office was buried 3 kilometers below the surface of Luna, protected by enough armor and shielding to survive a direct nuclear strike. Elena, I saw the transmission. How bad is it? 12 alien ships in the Kepler 442b system, demanding surrender and integration. Standard conquest scenario, but they're using terminology that suggests a larger organizational structure. This hegemony has probably been doing this for a long time. Recommendations? We go now. Full deployment of the 1st Strike Division. If this is what I think it is, a galactic empire that's been picking off human colonies one by one, then we need to send a very clear message. General Thompson was quiet for a moment, and Elena knew what he was thinking. For 25 years, Earth had been preparing for this moment. The sudden silence of the colonies, the strange readings their long-range sensors had detected, the gradual expansion of something large and organized moving through their sector of the galaxy. They had built fleets, developed weapons, created technologies that pushed the boundaries of physics itself, but they had never been tested in real combat. Authorization granted, Thompson said finally. Operation Homecoming is now active. Bring our people home, Elena. Elena smiled grimly. Copy that, General. Prometheus rising out. She turned to address her bridge crew. All hands, this is Admiral Vasquez. Today we learn whether 25 years of preparation was enough. Today we find out if our children in the colonies still remember what it means to be human. Today we remind the galaxy why Earth went silent. The command center erupted in controlled activity as her officers began the launch sequence. Around Earth, ships that had been waiting in the dark spaces between planets began moving toward their assigned coordinates. Elena walked to the main tactical display, where Commander Rodriguez was coordinating the fleet movements. The 1st Strike Division consisted of 48 ships, destroyers, cruisers, and the 5 massive dreadnoughts that represented humanity's most advanced military technology. Estimated arrival time at Kepler 442b? Elena asked. Using standard hyperspace drives? 17 days, Rodriguez replied. But if we use the experimental dimensional fold drives, 2 hours, Elena finished. I know the specs, Commander. The question is whether those drives are ready for actual deployment. Dr. Amanda Foster, Elena's chief science officer, looked up from her console. Admiral, we've run every simulation possible. The dimensional fold drives work by temporarily moving our ships into a parallel dimension where the laws of physics operate differently. In that dimension, faster-than-light travel is not just possible, it's inevitable. The risks are... I know the risks, Elena interrupted. Dimensional displacement, temporal paradoxes, the possibility of emerging inside a star or planet. But Sarah Chen Okafor's people don't have 17 days. They probably don't have 17 hours. She looked around the command center at her senior officers. These were the best of the best. Men and women who had devoted their lives to preparing for a war they hoped would never come. Now that war was here. Dr. Foster, what's the probability of successful dimensional fold to the Kepler 442b system? Based on our calculations and the stellar cartography data, approximately 87%. But Admiral, if something goes wrong, 3 million human beings die as slaves while we're still in hyperspace, Elena said firmly. That's not acceptable. Prepare the fleet for dimensional fold. Around her, the bridge crew began the complex process of preparing for humanity's most dangerous form of space travel. The dimensional fold drives were based on technology that barely made sense even to the scientists who had developed it. They worked by convincing the universe that the ships existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, then selecting the dimension where the destination was closest. It was the kind of technology that only made sense if you approached physics not as a set of immutable laws but as a system of guidelines that could be negotiated with. "Admiral, incoming transmission from Luna Command," Park announced. General Thompson's face appeared on the screen again, but this time he wasn't alone. Elena recognized President Sarah Martinez and Dr. Liu Wei, head of the Advanced Research Division. "Elena, before you go, there's something you need to know," Thompson said. "Dr. Liu's people have been analyzing long-range sensor data, trying to understand what we're dealing with. Tell her what you found." Dr. Liu leaned forward, his expression grave. "Admiral, we've identified at least 14,000 star systems under this hegemony's control. Based on communication intercepts and energy signature analysis, they've been expanding for approximately 2,000 years. They have hundreds of different species under their control." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. 14,000 systems. That was a significant portion of this spiral arm of the galaxy. How many ships are we talking about? Conservative estimate? Several 100,000 combat vessels plus support fleets, industrial ships, and transport craft. "Admiral, we're not just facing an enemy. We're facing a civilization that has conquered most of the local galaxy." President Martinez spoke up. "Elena, if this is too big, if we're outmatched, you have authorization to retreat and return to Earth. We can try diplomatic contact, see if there's a way to negotiate." Elena looked at the tactical display, where the 48 ships of the 1st Strike Division were preparing to fold space itself around them. 48 ships against hundreds of thousands. By any reasonable calculation, it was hopeless. But Elena had not spent 25 years preparing to be reasonable. "Ma'am, with respect, we're past the point of diplomacy. This hegemony has been enslaving human colonies for decades. They think we're extinct or irrelevant. They're about to learn how wrong they are." She turned to her communications officer. "Commander Park, prepare a message for transmission to all human colonies. Use the emergency frequency." "Yes, Admiral. Recording now." Elena straightened her uniform and looked directly into the camera. She thought about Sarah Chen Okafor, facing impossible odds on a world 50 light-years away. She thought about all the other colonies that had gone silent, all the human beings who had been taken from their homes and forced into slavery. She thought about Earth, and what it meant to be human. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force, commanding the 1st Strike Division. To all human colonies, to all our people scattered among the stars, Earth has received your calls for help. Earth has not forgotten you. Earth has not abandoned you. For 25 years, we have been preparing for this day. Today we return to the galaxy, and we return as warriors." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "To the Vorthak hegemony and any other force that threatens human freedom. You picked the wrong species to enslave. You mistook our silence for weakness. You forgot that humans are at their most dangerous when they appear to be helpless. Today you learn why Earth went silent. Today you learn what happens when you threaten our children." Elena looked at each of her senior officers, seeing determination and courage in their faces. "Today we remind the galaxy that humanity chooses its own destiny. Today we come home." She gestured to Park to end the recording, then turned to the tactical display. "All ships prepare for dimensional fold. Target Kepler 442b system. Mission parameters: destroy all hostile forces, liberate all human personnel, and send a very clear message about the price of threatening Earth's children." The command center hummed with energy as the dimensional fold drives powered up. Reality began to bend around the 1st Strike Division, creating visual distortions that made Elena's eyes water. The laws of physics humanity had learned were more like suggestions when you had enough advanced technology and complete disregard for what was supposed to be possible. "Fold drives at full power," Dr. Foster reported. "Dimensional displacement in 60 seconds. Elena gripped the railing around the tactical display as space itself began to twist around them. Through the viewport, she could see Earth growing smaller, along with the entire solar system. They were moving not just through space, but through dimensions that existed parallel to normal reality. 30 seconds to fold. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of her grandfather who had fought in the last great war on Earth itself. He had told her once that courage was not the absence of fear, but acting despite fear when something important was at stake. 3 million human beings on Kepler 442b were counting on her. Billions more on Earth were counting on her. The future of humanity's place in the galaxy was counting on her. 10 seconds to fold. Elena opened her eyes and watched as reality dissolved around them. The last thing she saw before the dimensional fold completed was Earth itself, the blue marble that had given birth to the most stubborn, determined, and dangerous species in the galaxy. The Vorthak hegemony had conquered 800 species across 14,000 worlds. They had never failed. They had never been seriously challenged. They were about to meet humanity. And humanity was about to remind them that some prey animals were actually predators in disguise. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of eternal harmony, watching the chronometer count down the final minutes of the human ultimatum. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for what would be another routine integration. The transport pods were ready. The processing centers had been notified. The paperwork for classification of a new Class 7 species had already been filed. "Admiral, the humans are broadcasting again," his communications officer reported. "Put it through." Director Sarah Chen Okafor appeared on the main screen. She looked calmer than before, which Kethvar found mildly interesting. Most species became increasingly agitated as integration time approached. "Admiral Kethvar, my people have reached their decision. I trust they have chosen wisely." Sarah smiled, and once again Kethvar found her expression unsettling. "We choose to reject your ultimatum. New Haven will remain free." Kethvar sighed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "That is unfortunate. Corrective measures will now be necessary. I had hoped your species would be more reasonable." "Oh, we're very reasonable," Sarah replied. "We're just not surrender-oriented. You see, Admiral, you made a mistake when you assumed we were alone." Before Kethvar could respond, his sensor officer spoke up with obvious confusion. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive spatial distortions throughout the system. Energy readings are... This can't be right." Kethvar turned from the screen. "Clarify." "Sir, space itself appears to be folding. The readings suggest dimensional displacement on a scale that should be impossible with known physics." On the screen, Sarah's smile grew wider. "Admiral, I'd like you to meet someone. Earth, are you receiving?" The transmission split, showing a second human on half the screen. This one wore a military uniform that Kethvar didn't recognize, and her eyes held the cold calculation of a professional warrior. "This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force. New Haven. We received your message. We're here." Kethvar stared at the screen in confusion. "Impossible. Your homeworld is 50 light-years away. Even with advanced hyperspace technology, you couldn't have traveled here in less than 2 days." "You're right," Elena replied calmly. "We made the trip in 2 hours. We cheated." Before Kethvar could ask what she meant, the universe around his fleet exploded into chaos. 48 human warships materialized from dimensional folds that tore reality apart like paper. They didn't decloak or drop out of hyperspace. They simply appeared, as if they had always been there, but reality was just now noticing them. "Battle stations," Kethvar shouted, but his crew was already moving. The hegemony fleet had faced surprise attacks before. Their shields powered up, their weapons came online. Their ships moved into defensive formation with practiced precision. It didn't matter. The human ships opened fire with weapons that made no sense. Instead of energy beams or projectile weapons, they fired concentrated streams of altered reality. Where the streams hit hegemony shields, the shields simply forgot how to exist. Where they hit armor, the molecular bonds holding the metal together decided to become something else entirely. The hegemony destroyer, Peace Through Order, took a direct hit from a human cruiser and folded in on itself like origami. Its crew crushed. As the ship's geometry became mathematically impossible, the battlecruiser Eternal Wisdom returned fire with its most powerful plasma cannons, only to watch as the human ship, the beams were aimed at, flickered into another dimension for a split second, allowing the weapons fire to pass harmlessly through empty space. Impossible, Kethvar's tactical officer screamed. They're violating the fundamental laws of physics. All ships, concentrate fire on the human flagship, Kethvar ordered. 12 hegemony warships focused their combined firepower on the massive human dreadnought that Admiral Vasquez was commanding. Enough energy to crack a moon's crust struck the ship's hull in a coordinated barrage that should have vaporized anything smaller than a planet. The human ship absorbed every joule of energy, converted it to something else entirely, and fired it back as a weapon that turned 3 hegemony cruisers into exotic matter that briefly existed in 17 dimensions, simultaneously, before collapsing into quantum foam. What are they? Someone on the bridge whispered. Kethvar didn't have an answer. In 2,000 years of hegemony expansion, they had never encountered anything like this. These humans weren't just technologically advanced. They were using science that shouldn't exist, manipulating reality itself as if it were clay in their hands. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by weapons that rewrote the rules of existence. Sir, the humans are hailing us, the communications officer reported, his voice shaking. Put it through. Admiral Vasquez appeared on the screen again, but now she was standing in what was clearly a combat command center. Behind her, Kethvar could see human officers working at control stations that seemed to be monitoring the battle in real time. Admiral Kethvar, this is your only warning. Surrender now and you will be treated according to the laws of war. Continue to resist, and you will be destroyed. Impossible, Kethvar said, though his confidence was cracking. We are the Vorthak. Hegemony. We have conquered 800 species across 14,000 worlds. You are primitives from a backwater system. Wrong on both counts, Vasquez replied coldly. You're slavers who got lucky for a few thousand years, and we're humans who spent 25 years preparing for this conversation. As if to punctuate her words, another hegemony ship exploded, as it was hit by a weapon that convinced its fusion reactors to work in reverse, creating a miniature black hole that lasted just long enough to consume the entire vessel. You cannot defeat the entire hegemony, Kethvar said desperately. Even if you destroy this fleet, we have millions of ships, hundreds of billions of warriors. I know, Vasquez said. We've been studying you for decades. We know about your 14,000 systems, your hundreds of species, your vast fleets. We know about all of it. She leaned closer to the screen. We also know that your entire civilization is built on the assumption that conquered species stay conquered. You've never had to deal with a species that fights back. You've never faced an enemy that refuses to accept defeat. You've certainly never fought humans. On the tactical display, Kethvar could see that only 3 of his 12 ships were still combat effective. The rest had been destroyed or disabled in less than 10 minutes of fighting. His crew stared at their instruments in shock, unable to process what they were witnessing. Admiral, incoming transmission from the planet, his communications officer reported. Sarah Chen Okafor appeared on a corner of the screen, and Kethvar could see New Haven City behind her. People were celebrating in the streets, cheering and waving flags as they watched the liberation of their world. Admiral Kethvar, I forgot to mention something during our earlier conversation, she said cheerfully. When you asked if we'd ever encountered humans before, you said your surveys indicated Earth went silent due to internal conflicts or resource depletion. That was our assessment. Kethvar replied numbly. Wrong again. Earth went silent because they were building these ships, because they were developing these weapons, because they were preparing to remind the galaxy that humanity doesn't surrender. She gestured toward the ongoing battle, where human ships were methodically destroying the last of the hegemony resistance. Earth went silent because they were getting ready to be very, very loud. Another hegemony ship exploded, its death scream lost in the vacuum of space. Kethvar realized that he was about to witness the first military defeat in hegemony history. More than that, he was about to experience the complete destruction of everything he thought he knew about warfare, technology, and humanity's place in the galaxy. Admiral Vasquez, he said finally, I surrender. I surrender on behalf of my fleet. Too late for most of your ships, Vasquez replied without emotion. But I'll accept the surrender of your flagship. Prepare to be boarded. The battle was over. In 17 minutes, 48 human ships had destroyed 11 hegemony warships and disabled the 12th. Not a single human vessel had been seriously damaged. It wasn't a battle, it was a demonstration. As his crew prepared for capture, Kethvar tried to understand what had just happened. The hegemony had encountered humans before, hadn't they? There had been colonies, settlements, mining operations, all small, all primitive, all easily integrated. But those hadn't been humans, he realized now. Those had been human settlements, cut off from their homeworld, left to fend for themselves with limited technology and resources. Easy prey for a galactic empire. This was humanity with 25 years to prepare, with the full resources of their homeworld, with technology that treated the laws of physics as mild suggestions rather than absolute limits. This was humanity angry. The airlock of his ship hissed open, and Kethvar found himself face to face with Admiral Elena Vasquez. She was taller than he had expected, and her presence filled the corridor like a physical force. Behind her stood human soldiers in armor that seemed to bend light around itself. "Admiral Kethvar," she said formally, "you are now a prisoner of war of the Earth Defense Force. You will be treated according to the Geneva Convention, which you have probably never heard of, but are about to become very familiar with." "Admiral Vasquez," Kethvar said quietly, "what do you want from me?" Elena smiled, and it was the same expression Sarah Okafor had worn during their conversation, the smile of a predator who had been waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike. "I want you to carry a message back to your hegemony. I want you to tell them that Earth remembers its children. I want you to tell them that every human colony you've enslaved, every human being you've taken from their home, every world you've stolen, we know about all of it." She stepped closer, and Kethvar could smell something on her that he had never encountered before, the scent of absolute certainty, of complete conviction that victory was inevitable. "Tell them that we're coming for our people. Tell them that we don't negotiate with slavers. Tell them that the galaxy is about to remember why humans are the most dangerous species to ever evolve." Kethvar nodded slowly, understanding that he had just witnessed the opening move in a war that would reshape the galaxy. "And Admiral?" Vasquez added quietly, "Tell them that Earth didn't go silent because we were weak. We went silent because we were loading our weapons." Outside the flagship, human ships began forming up for their next jump. They had a galaxy to liberate, and 47 ships remaining after leaving one behind to escort the hegemony survivor back to his people with humanity's message. The age of the Vorthak hegemony was ending. The age of human expansion was about to begin. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak Prime stood in the center of the Great Assembly on Hegemon Prime, his crystalline form catching and reflecting the light from 1,000 different worlds. Around him, representatives from 800 species sat in perfect concentric circles, each in their designated place according to their classification within the hegemony's hierarchy. For 2,000 years, this chamber had been the center of galactic civilization. From here, the hegemony had brought order to chaos, purpose to primitive worlds, and peace to species that had known only conflict. It was beautiful, efficient, and eternal. Today, for the first time in its history, the Great Assembly was afraid. "Report from Admiral Kethvar of the Integration Fleet 7, announced the herald, a floating crystal that served as the Assembly's voice. A holographic projection filled the center of the chamber, showing the battered form of Admiral Kethvar. His normally pristine crystalline structure was cracked and dulled, and his musical voice carried notes of trauma that resonated through the Assembly like a discordant symphony. "Supreme Chancellor, honored representatives, I bring grave news from the Kepler 442b system. Integration Fleet 7 has been destroyed." A wave of shock rippled through the Assembly. In 2 millennia of expansion, no hegemony fleet had ever been completely destroyed. Individual ships had been lost to accidents or natural phenomena, but never an entire integration fleet. "Explain," Vorthak Prime commanded. The primitive species known as humans received military support from their homeworld. A fleet of 48 warships appeared using technology that violates fundamental physical laws. Our ships were destroyed in 17 minutes of combat. The assembly erupted in overlapping voices, clicks, whistles, harmonic tones, and electromagnetic pulses as hundreds of species tried to speak at once. Vorthak Prime raised one crystalline appendage, and silence fell immediately. This is impossible. Our intelligence reports indicate that Earth went silent decades ago. Their technology was classified as early industrial. That was the assessment, Supreme Chancellor. The assessment was wrong. Kethvar's projection shifted to show recordings from the battle. The assembled representatives watched in stunned silence as human ships materialized from impossible dimensional folds and proceeded to destroy hegemony warships with weapons that seemed to rewrite reality itself. "How is this possible?" whispered Representative Quillix of the Tentacle Collective, a species that had joined the hegemony 500 years ago after their homeworld was integrated. "The humans call it dimensional fold technology," Kethvar reported. "They appear to have developed the ability to manipulate space-time itself, to move between dimensions, to alter the fundamental constants of physics within localized areas. Such technology would require theoretical advances beyond anything in our databases," said the floating consciousness known as Mind Unit 7749, one of the hegemony's chief scientists. "Yes," Kethvar agreed. "It would. The humans have apparently made such advances." Vorthak Prime studied the battle recordings with growing unease. The hegemony's strength had always been based on overwhelming technological superiority, combined with vast numerical advantage. They had never encountered a species whose technology was so far beyond their own understanding. "What did the humans demand?" he asked. "Nothing, Supreme Chancellor. They made no demands for territory, resources, or tribute. Their leader, Admiral Elena Vasquez, stated only that they were reclaiming their people and that the galaxy would remember why humans are dangerous. And then they left, Supreme Chancellor. After destroying my fleet and liberating the human colony, they departed, but they left me alive specifically to deliver a message." The assembly leaned forward as one, 800 species hanging on every word. The message was simple. Earth remembers its children, and Earth is coming for them. They claimed knowledge of every human world that has been integrated, every human being that has been relocated. They stated that they do not negotiate with what they called slavers. Representative Hissick of the Scale Touched raised a clawed appendage. "Supreme Chancellor, surely this is an isolated incident. One world, one fleet. Even with advanced technology, they cannot challenge the entire hegemony." Before Vorthak Prime could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the assembly chamber. Emergency lights flashed in patterns that meant only one thing. The hegemony was under attack. "Supreme Chancellor," the herald announced, "we are receiving emergency transmissions from 17 different sectors. Human fleets have appeared simultaneously across hegemony space. Integration centers on Kalos 7, Theta Centauri, and New Mumbai are under attack. Industrial facilities at Processed World 447 and Classification Center Prime have gone silent." The assembly dissolved into chaos as representatives from dozens of species began transmitting orders to their homeworlds, coordinating defenses, and demanding explanations. But Vorthak Prime stood frozen, staring at the tactical display that showed red dots appearing across hegemony territory like a spreading infection. "How many ships?" he asked quietly. "Initial estimates suggest over 3,000 human vessels, Supreme Chancellor. They are operating in small strike groups, appearing without warning, destroying military targets and liberating integrated populations. 3,000 ships, moving simultaneously across thousands of light years of space, using technology that made hegemony defenses irrelevant. It was not an invasion. It was a revelation. The humans had not sent a few advanced ships to rescue one colony. They had deployed a fleet capable of challenging the entire hegemony. "Supreme Chancellor," Admiral Kethvar's projection said, "there is more. The human admiral told me to inform you that Earth did not go silent because they were weak. They went silent because they were preparing. For 25 years, while we were integrating their colonies, they were building weapons specifically designed to destroy us. The tactical display updated again, showing more human fleets appearing in systems that had been under hegemony control for centuries. But these were not random attacks. The humans were targeting specific facilities, integration centers, processing plants, classification stations. They were systematically dismantling the infrastructure of slavery that the hegemony had built. Over 2 millennia. They know everything, Vorthak Prime realized aloud. They know our organization, our facilities, our methods. They have been studying us while we ignored them. Yes, Supreme Chancellor, Kethavar confirmed. Admiral Vasquez indicated that Earth has been monitoring hegemony activities for decades. They know about our 14,000 systems, our classification, hierarchies, our integration procedures. They have prepared specifically to counter our advantages. Representative Zilix of the Hive Mind spoke with the collective voice of 10 billion individuals. What do they want? Surely they seek territory, or resources, or dominion over lesser species. No, Kethavar said simply. They want their people back, and they want the galaxy to remember what freedom means. The Supreme Chancellor studied the reports flooding in from across hegemony space. Human fleets were operating with impossible coordination, striking targets simultaneously across thousands of light years. But more disturbing than their military capability was their apparent objective. They weren't conquering worlds, they were liberating them. At each facility they attacked, the humans destroyed the military and administrative structures that maintained hegemony control, but left the infrastructure intact. More importantly, they were offering the freed populations a choice: join humanity's coalition as equals, or choose complete independence. Many species were choosing independence. Some were choosing to join the humans. None were choosing to remain with the hegemony when given an actual option. Supreme Chancellor, the Herald announced, we are receiving a transmission on all frequencies. The source appears to be broadcasting simultaneously from multiple points across the galaxy. Put it through. The holographic display shifted to show Admiral Elena Vasquez standing on the bridge of her flagship. But she was not alone. Around her stood representatives from dozens of species, beings that the hegemony recognized as former Class 5, Class 6, and Class 7 classifications. Slaves who had been freed and now stood as equals beside their human liberators. I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Earth Defense Force, speaking for the Free Worlds Coalition, she began. For 2,000 years, the Vorthak hegemony has told the galaxy that some species are born to rule, and others are born to serve. Today we prove that lie wrong. She gestured to the diverse group around her. These beings were classified as inferior by your system. Today they stand as free citizens of worlds that choose their own destiny. Today they prove that the only classification that matters is the choice to be free. Vorthak Prime felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. For 2 millennia, the hegemony had maintained order by convincing species that resistance was futile, that their classification was natural and inevitable. But here were dozens of inferior species standing alongside the humans as apparent equals. The hegemony will fall, Vasquez continued, not because we are stronger than you, but because we offer something you never could: choice. We offer species the right to determine their own future, to choose their own path, to live free from the classifications and limitations you imposed. The display showed images from across the galaxy, freed populations celebrating, hegemony facilities being dismantled, former slaves learning to govern themselves. It was a transformation happening in real time across thousands of worlds. To the people of the hegemony worlds we say this: you are not your classification, you are not your assigned role, you are free beings with the right to choose your own destiny. Join us or choose independence, but never again accept that freedom is something only some species deserve. She looked directly at the camera, and Vorthak Prime felt as if she were staring at him personally. To the leadership of the hegemony, we offer this one opportunity: surrender peacefully, release all classified populations, and accept trial for crimes against free beings. Refuse, and face the consequences of 2,000 years of oppression. The transmission ended, leaving the great assembly in stunned silence. For the first time in hegemony history, Supreme Chancellor Vorthak Prime did not know what to do. His civilization faced not just military defeat, but something far worse: the complete collapse of the ideology that justified their existence. "Supreme Chancellor," Admiral Kethvar said quietly, "I respectfully request permission to return to my homeworld. I wish to spend my remaining time with my family." "Granted," Vorthek Prime replied absently. Around him, representatives from 800 species were making similar requests. The Great Assembly, the center of galactic governance for 2 millennia, was emptying as beings who had never questioned their place in the hierarchy suddenly realized they had choices. Vorthak Prime stood alone in the center of the chamber, surrounded by empty seats and the echoing silence of a dying empire. Outside, human fleets continued their methodical liberation of world after world, offering freedom to species that had forgotten it was possible. The galaxy had spent 2,000 years accepting that some beings were naturally superior to others. In a few hours, humanity had reminded everyone that freedom was not a privilege to be granted by superiors, but a right inherent to all intelligent life. The Vorthak hegemony had controlled 800 species across 14,000 worlds. It had seemed eternal, unshakable, inevitable, but it had made one fatal error. It had forgotten that free beings, when given the choice, would always choose freedom over slavery. And now the galaxy was remembering what it meant to be free. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak Prime activated his personal communicator and sent a message to Admiral Elena Vasquez. The message was simple: "The hegemony surrenders unconditionally. We accept your terms." For the first time in 2,000 years, the galaxy would be ruled not by classifications and hierarchies, but by the radical idea that all beings deserve the right to choose their own path. The humans had not conquered the galaxy. They had liberated it. And in doing so, they had reminded everyone of the most important truth in the universe. Freedom, once remembered, could never be forgotten again.
The stars flickered as the UES Defiant tore through the fabric of space, emerging from hyperspace like a phantom in the night. The massive warship, nearly a mile long, represented humanity's greatest achievement, and perhaps its last hope. Inside the bridge, Captain James Walker stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his weathered face reflecting off the reinforced windows that separated him from the endless void of space. "Status report," Walker said, his voice steady despite the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. The bridge crew, just 15 of the total 150 aboard, worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. "All systems operational, Captain," replied Thomas, the ship's lead engineer. "The stealth systems are holding steady, and our new shield modifications are running at optimal levels." He paused, checking his displays. "But I should remind you that we've never tested them in actual combat." Walker nodded. They hadn't had time to test much of anything. The Stellar Empire's invasion had come swiftly and brutally, overwhelming humanity's outer colonies one by one. Earth's fleet, spread thin across dozens of systems, had been caught off guard and destroyed piecemeal. Now, only the Defiant stood between the Empire and Earth itself. "Sensor report," Walker called out, moving to the central holographic display that dominated the bridge. The massive screen showed their position relative to Imperial space, a vast territory that stretched across thousands of light years. "Long-range sensors are picking up the Imperial Armada," answered Lisa from her station. Her fingers danced across the controls as she brought up detailed scans. 10,000 ships, just as our intelligence reported. They're moving in standard Imperial formation, heading directly for the Sol system. The bridge fell silent as the information sank in. 10,000 ships against one. The Empire's fleet was a sight that had brought hundreds of alien civilizations to their knees over 3,000 years. Each Imperial vessel was a marvel of engineering, powered by technology that humanity had only begun to understand. But Walker allowed himself a small smile. The Empire, for all its power and history, had grown complacent. They expected every race they encountered to fight the same way they did, with massive fleets meeting in open space, following the strict rules of engagement that the Empire had established millennia ago. "Tell me about their formation," Walker said, zooming in on the holographic display. The Imperial ships moved in perfect geometric patterns, like a giant mathematical equation given form in space. "Classic Imperial Wolfpack formation," answered Mark, the tactical officer. "They're arranged in layers, with their heaviest warships forming a sphere around their command vessels. Smaller ships patrol the outer edges. It's the same formation they've used for the past 1,000 years. And that's exactly why we're going to beat them," Walker said, addressing his crew. "The Empire hasn't faced a serious challenge in centuries. They'd forgotten how to adapt, how to think differently." He touched the display, highlighting key points in the Imperial formation. "They expect us to either surrender or die gloriously in a hopeless battle. They don't expect us to fight smart." A light began blinking on the engineering console. "Captain," Thomas called out, "we're receiving the automated Imperial surrender demand. Standard message: submit to Imperial authority or face complete annihilation." Walker stepped back to his command chair, settling into it with deliberate calmness. "Send no response. Let them think their message was lost in space. Meanwhile, plot a course that will take us behind that outer patrol line. We're going to show the Empire why humanity has survived every challenge we've ever faced." The Defiant moved silently through space, its revolutionary stealth systems making it nearly invisible to Imperial sensors. The massive ship, despite its size, produced no more energy signature than a small asteroid. This was humanity's secret weapon, technology developed not through millennia of gradual advancement like the Empire, but through desperate innovation in the face of extinction. As they approached the Imperial fleet, Walker studied the enemy ships through the enhanced viewing screens. The Imperial vessels were beautiful in their own way, all sweeping lines and golden hulls that reflected the starlight. They were designed to inspire awe and fear in equal measure. But Walker saw something else. He saw arrogance given physical form. "Ready all weapons," Walker commanded, "but hold fire until my mark. We're not here to start a battle. We're here to start a war of nerves." He turned to his communication officer. "Is the package ready?" "Yes, sir," came the response. "Ready to broadcast on all Imperial frequencies." Walker nodded. The package was a carefully crafted message, designed to do something the Empire had never experienced in its 3,000 years of conquest: make them afraid. "Take us in closer," Walker ordered. The Defiant slipped between two Imperial patrol ships, close enough to see the crews moving behind their illuminated windows. No alarms sounded. No weapons turned to track them. They were invisible, a ghost ship sliding through the heart of the mightiest fleet in known space. "Sir," Lisa called out, her voice tight with tension, "we're picking up communications from the Imperial command ship. They're ordering the fleet to begin acceleration toward Earth. They're starting their attack run." "Perfect timing," Walker said. "Send the package. All frequencies, maximum power." Across every Imperial ship, every communication device, every screen and holographic display, the same image appeared: detailed scans of Imperial ship designs, defense configurations, and patrol routes. Along with the data was a simple message: "We see you. We know you. We can reach you anywhere." The effect was immediate. The perfectly ordered Imperial formation rippled as ships began breaking formation, commanders ordering emergency scans and defensive maneuvers. The Empire had never faced an enemy that could penetrate their security so completely, could stand invisible in their midst. Multiple emergency signals being broadcast, Lisa reported, trying to hide a smile. "They're trying to figure out how we got this information. Several ships are reporting possible system breaches." Walker stood, walking to the front of the bridge to watch the chaos unfold. "The Empire has spent 3,000 years teaching everyone to fear them," he said quietly. "They've forgotten what it feels like to be afraid themselves. That changes today." The Defiant hung in space, watching as the mighty Imperial armada scrambled to respond to a threat they couldn't see or understand. In the confusion, 3 Imperial ships collided, their perfect formation shattered by panic. Others fired weapons at sensor ghosts, their crews jumping at shadows. "Take us out," Walker ordered as the chaos reached its peak. "Nice and slow. Let them wonder if we're still there, watching them." He turned to his crew, seeing the hope in their eyes that had replaced the fear of just hours before. "The Empire thinks that power comes from size, from numbers, from brute force. We're going to teach them that real power comes from here." He tapped his temple, and from here, he placed a hand over his heart. As the Defiant slipped away into the darkness of space, Walker knew that this was just the beginning. The Empire had never lost a war because they had never faced an enemy who understood that victory doesn't always come from destroying your opponent. Sometimes, victory comes from making them destroy themselves. Behind them, the Imperial Armada's advance toward Earth had stopped. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Empire faced an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't understand, and therefore couldn't defeat. The mighty Empire had taken its first step toward learning what every human knew from birth, that the universe's greatest power isn't strength, but the ability to adapt, to think differently, and to turn apparent weakness into unconquerable strength. 3 days after their first encounter with the Imperial fleet, the UEA's Defiant hung silently in the shadow of a massive gas giant. The huge planet storms helped mask their presence, though Walker knew they hardly needed the help. The Empire's ships had been searching frantically for them, but their stealth technology remained unbeatable. "Show me the supply route again," Walker said, studying the holographic display. A red line appeared, marking the path that Imperial supply ships used to support their massive invasion fleet. Without these supply lines, the mighty Armada would be stopped as surely as if they'd been destroyed in battle. "Next convoy is due in 6 hours," Mark reported from his tactical station. 5 supply ships, 2 escort cruisers. Standard Imperial procedure. He paused, checking his readings. "They're running scared, Captain. The escorts used to be light frigates. Now they're using heavy cruisers." Walker nodded, satisfied. Fear was spreading through the Imperial ranks exactly as he planned. Every ship that moved through Imperial space now did so with the knowledge that the ghost ship called Defiant might be watching, might be waiting to strike. "Engineering. How are we looking?" Walker asked, knowing they'd pushed their systems hard during the past days of constant stealth operations. "All green, Captain," Thomas replied proudly. "The crew's got maintenance down to an art now. We can run silent for another 2 weeks if we need to." He didn't mention the fact that they'd been sleeping in shifts, working around the clock to keep their experimental systems running perfectly. Lisa's voice cut through the quiet bridge. "Captain, intercepting Imperial communications." They're fascinating." She worked quickly to translate the messages. "The Imperial commanders are fighting among themselves. 3 different escort commanders are claiming they saw us in 3 different systems. They're accusing each other of incompetence." "Perfect," Walker said softly. "The Empire's greatest weakness is their pride. They can't admit when they're wrong, can't accept that someone might be better than them at anything." He stood from his command chair, walking to the main viewport. "Time to push them harder. Prepare for attack run." The Defiant moved silently through space, approaching the supply route like a shark closing in on its prey. The crew worked with practiced efficiency, everyone knowing their role in the complex dance they were about to perform. They'd done this twice already in the past 3 days, each attack carefully planned to cause maximum psychological impact. "Supply convoy entering sensor range," Mark announced. "Right on schedule. Imperial precision working against them again." Walker allowed himself a small smile. The Empire's rigid adherence to schedules and procedures made them predictable. Predictability in space warfare was as good as painting a target on your ships. "Take us in. Standard attack pattern." Walker's voice was calm, but everyone on the bridge felt the tension rise. Each attack was a risk, each encounter a chance that the Empire might get lucky and spot them. The Defiant glided between the escort cruisers, completely invisible to their sensors. Walker watched through the viewing screen as they passed close enough to see individual windows on the Imperial ships. The massive cruisers, each one nearly the size of the Defiant, swept their sensors back and forth, searching for threats they could sense but not see. "In position," Mark reported. "All weapons locked on target." Walker took a deep breath. "Execute." The Defiant's stealth field dropped for exactly 3 seconds. In that time, precision-guided missiles streaked out from hidden launchers, each one targeting a specific system on the supply ships. The Empire's ships, designed to fight battles of brute force, never had a chance to raise their shields. Explosions rippled across the supply ships' hulls, not destroying them, but precisely crippling their engines, weapons, and communications. The escort cruisers spun in place, their sensors finally detecting the Defiant, but by then the human ship was already gone, its stealth field back in place. "Clean hits on all targets," Mark reported, unable to keep the satisfaction from his voice. "Supply ships are dead in space. Escort cruisers are launching fighters, but they're shooting blind." "Send the message," Walker ordered. Lisa transmitted their prepared broadcast. On every Imperial ship in range, screens lit up with the same message. "Your supplies are now our supplies. Your ships are now our targets. The Ghost is always watching." The bridge crew watched as panic spread through the Imperial formation. The escort cruisers began firing randomly into space, their powerful weapons harmlessly passing through areas where they thought the Defiant might be. Fighter craft zoomed in all directions, their pilots desperately searching for an enemy they had no hope of finding. "Imperial reinforcements incoming," Lisa reported. "They're calling every combat ship within 3 light years. 8 heavy cruisers, 12 destroyers." She paused, listening to more transmissions. "They're arguing about who's in command. Each captain is claiming they have priority." Walker nodded, everything going according to plan. Time to add to their confusion. "Engineering, prepare for Phase 2. Thomas's fingers flew across his console. "Ready, Captain. Though I still say this is crazy." "Crazy is exactly what we need," Walker replied. "Execute." The Defiant's experimental systems shifted into a configuration that had never been tested in combat before. Instead of merely hiding from sensors, they began broadcasting false signals, creating sensor ghosts that looked exactly like the Defiant. Suddenly, the Imperial ship's sensors showed 5 Defiant-class vessels surrounding them. The Empire's carefully organized response dissolved into chaos. Ships turned to face different threats. Commanders shouted contradictory orders, and in the confusion, 3 Imperial vessels collided, their shields flaring as they scraped against each other. "Multiple distress calls," Lisa reported, trying to track all the communications. "Half the Imperial commanders think they're under attack by a human battle fleet. The others are trying to convince them it's not real." She looked up at Walker. "They're completely disorganized." "That's what happens when you spend 3,000 years thinking you're invincible," Walker said. "You forget how to handle being afraid." He watched as more Imperial ships arrived, adding to the confusion rather than helping to resolve it. "Take us out, nice and slow. Let them keep chasing shadows." The Defiant slipped away, leaving behind a scene of chaos. The mighty Imperial warships, each one capable of destroying entire planets, were reduced to shooting at sensor ghosts and jumping at shadows. The supply convoy, carrying fuel and ammunition that the invasion fleet desperately needed, would now have to be rescued and repaired, causing delays that the Empire couldn't afford. As they reached safe distance, Walker addressed his crew. "The Empire thinks they lost today because we have better stealth technology. But that's not why we won. We won because they can't imagine anyone being better than them at anything. That pride, that inability to adapt or admit weakness, that's what we're really fighting." The bridge crew nodded, understanding. They'd just watched the mightiest military force in known space fall apart because they couldn't handle an enemy that didn't fight the way they expected. The Empire had spent so long being the strongest that they'd forgotten how to be smart. Get some rest, Walker ordered his crew. Tomorrow we hit another convoy, and another the day after that. Every day we'll show the Empire that all their power, all their ships, all their technology means nothing against an enemy they can't understand. As the crew began their rest rotation, Walker remained on the bridge, watching the distant flares of Imperial ships still firing at phantoms. He knew that somewhere in the Empire's vast fleet, someone would be learning from this, trying to understand how a single human ship could cause so much chaos. That person would be dangerous, would be a real threat. But for now, the Empire's own pride would keep them from listening to anyone who suggested they might need to change. The Defiant had become more than just a ship. It had become fear itself, a ghost that haunted the dreams of Imperial commanders. And fear, Walker knew, was the most powerful weapon humanity had ever created. The Imperial command ship Eternal Glory floated in space, its golden hull reflecting the light of nearby stars. Commander Reed stood at its main viewport, his hands clasped behind his back, as he studied the holographic displays showing the Empire's recent defeats. For 2 weeks, the human ship Defiant had struck at will, disappearing like smoke each time the Empire's forces tried to respond. "Show me the pattern again," Reed ordered. Unlike his fellow commanders, who raged at their inability to catch the ghost ship, Reed had spent days studying every encounter, every attack. He had done something no Imperial commander had done in centuries. He had started learning from his enemy. "Sir, there is no pattern," his subordinate replied nervously. "The human ship appears randomly. We cannot predict." "There is always a pattern," Reed interrupted. "We simply haven't learned to see it yet." He walked to the central tactical display, where red dots marked each of the Defiant's attacks. "These humans, they think differently from us. We must learn to think as they do." Aboard the Defiant, Captain Walker was facing challenges of his own. The constant stealth operations had pushed their systems to the limit. The crew was tired, working endless hours to keep their technological edge over the Empire. "Status report," Walker called out, noting the dark circles under his crew's eyes. "Main stealth systems at 60%, Captain," Thomas reported from engineering. "We can't keep running them continuously like this. We need at least 12 hours of downtime for proper maintenance." Walker nodded grimly. They'd known this would happen eventually. No ship, no matter how advanced, could operate at peak performance indefinitely. Options. "There's a debris field from an old battle," Mark suggested from tactical. "Lots of metal and radiation. It would help mask our signature while we do repairs." "Make it happen," Walker ordered. The Defiant changed course, sliding through space toward the distant debris field. They'd destroyed or disabled 15 Imperial supply convoys in 2 weeks. The Empire's mighty invasion fleet was starting to feel the strain, their ships running low on fuel and ammunition. But as the Defiant approached the debris field, Lisa's voice cut through the bridge's quiet. "Captain, multiple Imperial ships dropping out of hyperspace." Walker spun toward the tactical display. 5 Imperial heavy cruisers had appeared, their formation unlike anything they'd seen before. Instead of the Empire's usual rigid patterns, these ships moved flexibly, covering each other's blind spots. "They're using our tactics," Walker realized, a chill running down his spine. Someone in their command structure is learning. The Imperial ships launched clouds of sensor drones, flooding the area with scanning beams. The Defiant's stealth systems, already strained from weeks of continuous operation, struggled to compensate for the increased scrutiny. "Engineering, status," Walker demanded as warning lights began flashing across multiple stations. "Stealth systems failing," Thomas reported, his fingers flying across his controls. "Too many sensor beams, too many frequencies to mask. We need to shut down for a reset, or we'll burn out completely." Walker's mind raced. For the first time, they faced an Imperial commander who thought like a human, adapting, learning, using their own tactics against them. The debris field that was supposed to be their shelter had become a trap. "New transmission," Lisa announced. "It's different from their usual demands. A voice filled the bridge, speaking in carefully practiced human English. To the crew of the UES Defiant, I am Commander Reed of the Imperial Fleet. Your tactics have taught us much. You have earned the right to surrender with honor. End this hunt now, and your lives will be spared. Walker smiled grimly. He really has been studying us. He's trying to think like a human. He turned to his crew. But he's still thinking like an Imperial, trying to script everything. Time to show him how humans really fight. Sir, we can't maintain stealth, Thomas warned. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it now. Walker nodded. Drop the stealth field. All power to weapons and shields. As his crew stared at him in shock, he smiled. They want to learn how humans fight. Let's teach them. The Defiant flickered into visibility, its stealth field dissolving to reveal the massive warship in all its glory. The Imperial ships immediately moved to surround them, but Walker had already put his plan into motion. Launch all drones, he ordered. The Defiant released dozens of small automated craft, but instead of attacking, the drones flew into the debris field, their engines scattering the ancient wreckage in all directions. Massive sensor interference, Lisa reported. The debris is creating thousands of false readings. The Imperial ship's neat formation broke apart as they tried to track multiple threats at once. Reed had learned to think differently, but his crews were still bound by centuries of Imperial training. They couldn't handle the chaos, couldn't adapt quickly enough to the changing situation. Now show them why humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, Walker commanded. Full attack run. The Defiant exploded into action, its engines pushing it to maximum acceleration. Instead of trying to hide, they charged straight at the nearest Imperial cruiser. The Empire's ships had been designed to fight at long range, their weapons optimized for battles fought across thousands of kilometers. They weren't prepared for an enemy that would fight at point-blank range. They're trying to lock weapons, Mark reported, excitement in his voice. The debris is confusing their targeting systems. The Defiant roared past the first Imperial cruiser, so close that the crews could see each other through their viewports. The human ship's guns fired continuously, not trying to destroy their massive opponent, but targeting specific systems. Weapons, sensors, engines. Hard about, Walker ordered as they passed. Same again. Keep them reacting, don't give them time to think. The Defiant spun in space, a maneuver that Imperial ships of its size weren't supposed to be able to perform. They struck again and again, darting between the Imperial ships like a wolf among larger, slower prey. Each pass caused more damage. Each attack forced the Imperial ships to respond to a situation their training hadn't prepared them for. Imperial ships breaking formation, Lisa reported. 3 cruisers have significant damage. They're calling for reinforcements. Walker nodded. They've learned to think differently, but they haven't learned to trust their new thinking yet. The moment things go wrong, they fall back on their old ways. He turned to engineering. How are our systems? Better, Thomas replied. The break from stealth operations let the systems cool down. We can reactivate stealth in 5 minutes. Perfect timing, Walker said as more Imperial ships appeared at the edge of their sensor range. Let them see us win this fight. Then we vanish and let their imagination do our work for us. The Defiant made one final pass through the Imperial formation, its guns blazing. When it emerged on the other side, all 5 of Reed's cruisers were damaged, their neat formation shattered, their crews shaken by combat unlike anything in Imperial records. Stealth systems ready, Thomas reported. Broadcast on all frequencies, Walker ordered. Let them hear this before we disappear. Lisa transmitted their message. You tried to learn our ways, Commander Reed, but you forgot the most important lesson. Humans don't follow patterns. We create them, break them, and create new ones. We'll be watching your fleet, and next time, we'll have something new for you to learn. 1 month had passed since the UES Defiant first appeared in Imperial space. What had begun as a desperate mission by a single warship had evolved into something much more dangerous, a revolution of ideas. Captain Walker stood on the bridge, watching the holographic display that showed the current state of the Empire's territory. "Show me the rebellion zones again," Walker said. Red dots appeared across the map, marking places where subject species had begun rising up against Imperial rule. What had once been a few isolated incidents had spread like wildfire across dozens of star systems. 27 major uprisings, Lisa reported. And those are just the ones big enough for us to detect. Our broadcasts of Imperial defeats have reached over 200 systems now. Walker nodded with satisfaction. This had always been part of the plan, not just to stop the Empire's invasion fleet, but to show the galaxy that the mighty Empire wasn't invincible. Hope was spreading among species that had lived under Imperial control for centuries. "Imperial command ship detected," Mark announced from Tactical. "It's Reed again. He's brought a full battle group, 30 ships, including their new hunter-killer vessels." Walker moved to the main viewport, watching as the Imperial formation took shape at the edge of the system. Unlike the rigid patterns the Empire had used a month ago, this formation was fluid, adaptive. Reed had been learning. "He's good," Walker admitted. "He's adapted faster than any of the other Imperial commanders." He studied the formation, noting how the smaller ships moved in unpredictable patterns, while the larger vessels maintained a defensive core. "He's using our own tactics against us, but with Imperial resources." "Captain," Thomas called from engineering, concern in his voice. "I'm detecting unusual sensor activity. They're using a new type of scanning technology, something we haven't seen before." Walker frowned. "Can our stealth systems handle it?" Thomas worked his controls, running simulations. "I think so, but it's going to be close. They're clearly designed specifically to detect our stealth field." Lisa looked up from her communication station. Incoming transmission from Commander Reed. The bridge screens lit up with the image of Reed, his Imperial uniform pristine, his expression calm but determined. "Captain Walker. Yes, we know your name now. We know much about you and your ship." Walker kept his face neutral, not showing his surprise that the Empire had learned his identity. "Commander Reed, I see you've brought friends, afraid to face us alone again." Reed smiled slightly. "I've learned from you, Captain. Humans use every advantage they have. Only a fool fights with one arm tied behind his back." His expression grew more serious. "Your campaign has been impressive. You've hurt us, made us question methods that have served us for millennia. But it ends today." The transmission cut off, and Walker turned to his crew. "He's trying to get in our heads. Time to show him that humans don't rattle easily." He moved to the tactical station. "What's he really up to? This isn't just about catching us." Mark studied the Imperial deployment. "They're forming a perimeter around this entire sector. And look," he highlighted several ships on the display. "These vessels are broadcasting powerful signals on all frequencies. They're trying to blanket the area with communications." "They want to stop our broadcasts," Walker realized. "They know we've been inspiring rebellions. They're trying to cut off the flow of information." He smiled grimly. "Which means we're hurting them worse than we thought." The bridge crew exchanged looks of determination. What had started as a mission to delay the invasion fleet had become something much bigger. They were changing the Empire itself, forcing it to confront its own weaknesses. "New Imperial ships arriving," Mark reported suddenly. "Dozens of them. They're creating a full blockade of the system." Walker studied the tactical display, watching as more Imperial ships arrived. Reed was committing massive resources to this trap, far more than should be necessary to catch a single human warship. Something didn't add up. Why commit so many ships to catch us? Walker wondered aloud. Unless, his eyes widened in realization, unless they know what we've been planning next. He turned to Lisa. "Any word from our allies?" Lisa checked her communications. Last transmission from the Krull resistance was 6 hours ago. They were preparing for the operation as planned. Walker's mind raced. The plan had been their most ambitious yet, coordinating with 3 different resistance movements to simultaneously strike at Imperial fuel depots. If Reed knew about it, all those resistance fighters would be walking into a trap. "We need to warn them," Walker said. "But if we break stealth to send a message, Reed will have us." The crew fell silent, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Thousands of resistance fighters could die if they didn't warn them. But if the Defiant was caught, Earth would lose its last defender. "There's another way," Thomas said quietly. Everyone turned to look at the engineer. "We've been working on a modification to our communication systems. We can send a narrow-beam transmission that might slip through their sensors." But he hesitated. "We'd have to get dangerously close to one of their ships." Walker didn't hesitate. "Plot the course. We're not letting those resistance fighters die." The Defiant moved silently through the Imperial blockade, its stealth systems straining against the new scanning technology. Every crew member held their breath as they slipped between massive Imperial warships, close enough to see individual weapons emplacements on their hulls. "In position," Mark whispered, though there was no need to keep his voice down. "Nearest Imperial ship is only 5 kilometers away." "Send the warning," Walker ordered. "Narrow beam, encrypted, resistance frequencies only." The message was sent, a tiny sliver of data slipping past the Imperial blockade. But as the transmission completed, alarms blared across the Defiance bridge. "They've detected us," Thomas shouted. "The new sensors picked up our transmission." The nearest Imperial ship immediately opened fire, massive energy weapons slicing through space where the Defiant had been moments before. The human ship's engines roared to life, pushing it away from the attack. "All ships converging on our position," Mark reported, his voice tight with tension. "They're using a search pattern we haven't seen before. Reed must have been planning this for weeks." Walker gripped the arms of his command chair. "Full evasive maneuvers. Use the debris from their own shots for cover." The Defiant rolled and twisted through space, dodging the increasingly accurate Imperial fire. Reed had indeed learned from their previous encounters, anticipating the human ship's movements and countering their usual tactics. "Engine hit," Thomas called out as the ship shuddered under Imperial fire. "Stealth systems failing. We can't maintain the field." The Defiant flickered into visibility, its stealth systems offline. Immediately, dozens of Imperial weapons locked onto the human vessel. Walker knew they couldn't win this fight through conventional means. They were outgunned and surrounded. "All power to forward shields," Walker ordered. "Set course directly for Reed's command ship." His crew stared at him in disbelief. "Sir," Mark questioned. "They expect us to run, to hide," Walker explained. "So we're going to do the opposite. We're going straight for their commander." The Defiant surged forward, absorbing punishing fire from all sides as it charged toward the Imperial command ship. Reed, seeing the human vessel barreling toward him, ordered his ship to take evasive action. But the massive Imperial vessel couldn't move quickly enough. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Walker commanded. "I want every ship in this sector to hear this." Lisa opened the channels, and Walker spoke clearly and confidently. "Commander Reed, you've learned to fight like humans. Now learn to think like humans. Look at your tactical display, count your ships, then look at what those ships are supposed to be protecting." Across Imperial space, communications officers heard the transmission and relayed it to their commanders. Reed, his eyes widening, rushed to his main tactical display. While his entire battle group had been focused on trapping the Defiant, the Imperial home fleet had been drawn away from its normal patrol routes. The fuel depots, supposedly the targets of the resistance attack, had been a decoy. "Check the Imperial Palace defenses," Reed ordered, sudden understanding dawning on his face. Reports flooded in. Palace defenses were under attack, but not by resistance fighters. The real attack was coming from within, from Imperial citizens inspired by the Defiance broadcasts. People who had never questioned Imperial rule were now rising up, demanding change. As the Defiant raced toward Reed's command ship, Walker continued his broadcast. You've spent a month chasing one ship, Commander. But we weren't just fighting you with the Defiant. We were fighting you with an idea. The idea that the Empire isn't invincible. That change is possible. And ideas, Commander Reed, are much harder to kill than ships. Reed watched in shock as reports of civil unrest flooded in from across Imperial space. The Defiant had never been the real threat. It had simply been the spark that lit a much larger fire. A fire that was now burning through the very heart of the Empire. The Imperial Palace shimmered in the light of twin suns, its golden spires reaching toward the sky, like fingers grasping for the stars themselves. For 3,000 years, it had stood as the unquestioned center of power in the galaxy. No enemy had ever reached its hallowed halls. No challenge to its authority had ever succeeded. Until today. Inside the Grand Council chamber, the 12 High Lords of the Empire sat in stunned silence as reports continued to flood in. 43 systems in open rebellion. 17 Imperial fleet groups refusing orders. And most shocking of all, crowds of Imperial citizens gathering in the streets of the capital itself, demanding reforms that would have been unthinkable just months ago. How did it come to this? Asked the eldest of the High Lords, his voice quavering with age and disbelief. How could one human ship cause so much chaos? The Imperial Intelligence Director rose from his seat, his face grave. My lords, it was never about the ship. The humans understood something we have forgotten. That our greatest strength was also our greatest weakness. He activated the chamber's holographic display, showing the spread of rebellions across Imperial space. For 3,000 years, we have ruled through power and fear. We made the galaxy afraid of us. The humans simply taught them not to be afraid anymore. In deep space, far from the Imperial capital, the UES Defiant limped through the darkness. The battle with Reed's forces had left the ship badly damaged. Life support was functioning on backup systems, and the main engines could manage only a fraction of their normal power. But they had survived, escaping the Imperial trap through a combination of daring and desperation. Captain Walker stood on the bridge, looking at the faces of his exhausted crew. They had accomplished something no one thought possible. A single human ship had changed the course of galactic history. Damage report, Walker asked, his voice rough from smoke inhalation after a fire had broken out on the lower decks. Not good, Thomas replied from engineering. Main propulsion at 30%. Stealth systems completely offline. Weapons at 50%. He managed a tired smile. But we're still flying, Captain. Walker nodded. They had known this mission might be one way. The fact that they were alive at all was a testament to their crew's skill and determination. Captain, Lisa called from communications, excitement breaking through her exhaustion. Incoming transmission from Earth. They're saying the Imperial invasion fleet has stopped advancing. They're holding position at the edge of our solar system. A murmur ran through the bridge crew. After weeks of fighting, the news seemed almost too good to believe. More than that, Lisa continued, her eyes wide as she processed the incoming data. The Imperial High Command has sent an official request for negotiations. She looked up, meeting Walker's gaze. Captain, they want to talk peace. Walker moved to the main viewport, looking out at the stars. They've realized that even if they destroy Earth, they can't destroy what we've started. The Empire is facing rebellions on too many fronts. They can't fight everyone at once. Incoming transmission, Lisa announced. It's from Commander Reed's ship. The bridge screens activated, showing Reed's face. The Imperial commander looked tired. The perfect composure of their first meeting, now replaced by the weariness of a man who had fought hard and learned difficult lessons. Captain Walker, Reed began, his voice formal but lacking its earlier condescension. The Imperial High Council has authorized me to establish a direct communication channel for preliminary discussions regarding a potential cessation of hostilities. Walker allowed himself a small smile. In simple terms, Commander, they want to talk peace. Reed's expression remained carefully neutral, but Walker thought he saw a flicker of respect in the Imperial's eyes. Yes, recent events have caused a revaluation of imperial policy regarding Earth and other non-imperial worlds. Recent events, Walker repeated. You mean the fact that a single human warship made your entire empire question itself? That people throughout imperial space are demanding change. Reed's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. I have been instructed to arrange a meeting between representatives of Earth and the Imperial High Council. The meeting would take place on neutral ground, with full diplomatic protocols in effect. Walker considered this. It could be a trap, but his instincts told him otherwise. The Empire was pragmatic above all else. If continuing the war threatened their hold on power, they would seek peace, at least until they could regain control of their rebellious systems. We'll bring your offer back to Earth, Walker said. But understand this, Commander, we won't accept a peace that leaves the Empire free to threaten us in the future. And we won't abandon the people who have risen up against Imperial rule. Reed's expression changed slightly, something like surprise crossing his features. You truly care about the rebel worlds. They are not your people. That's the difference between us, Commander, Walker replied. You divide the galaxy into your people and others. We see all sentient beings as having the right to determine their own future. He leaned forward slightly. Remember that when your High Council is deciding what terms to offer. The transmission ended, and Walker turned to his crew. Set course for Earth. It's time to go home. As the Defiant limped toward Earth, Walker spent long hours in his quarters, thinking about what they had accomplished and what might come next. They had saved Earth, at least for now, but they had also started something much bigger, a fundamental change in how the galaxy viewed the Empire. 3 days later, the Defiant approached Earth's orbit. The planet's defensive fleet moved to escort them home, ships flashing their lights in salute to the vessel that had accomplished the impossible. As they made their final approach, Lisa called Walker to the communication station. Captain, we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy, she said, wonder in her voice. Messages from worlds we've never contacted before. They've all heard about the Defiant, about what we did. She looked up at him, eyes shining. They're calling us the ship that changed the stars. Walker looked around at his crew, seeing in their faces the pride of people who knew they had made history. The Empire will try to regain control, he warned them. This isn't over. Peace talks could take years, and the Empire won't give up its power easily. But something has changed, Thomas said from his station. They can't go back to how things were. Too many people have seen that the Empire can be challenged. Walker nodded. That's our real victory. Not defeating their ships or disrupting their supply lines, but showing the galaxy that change is possible. He moved to the main viewport, watching as Earth grew larger in their view. The Empire built its power on the idea that resistance was futile.